Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast, supported by Locol. No Benji Naesen with us today. He's got unavoidable work commitments, unfortunately, so it'll just be me freestyling, and I must admit it is a bit weird to be doing it solo. Today was stage 4 from Piacenza to Sestola, 187 kilometers long. It was supposed to be the medium mountain chaotic stage to spice up the third week. Last year, they had Etna on stage 3 to try and spice up the GC action. This year, this is the hardest stage we've had to date. I think about 3,000 meters of climbing, maybe a touch over. Flat for the first 80 Ks, allowing a large break to form, then rolling climbs of between 10 and 25 minutes. And then the finale is the Colle Passerino, which is actually quite difficult, more difficult than perhaps I intimated on the podcast yesterday. It's 4.3 Ks, 9.5%, but it's difficult at the start. There's, I think, from 500 meters in to 2 kilometers in, the average is about 11.5%, with some steep pitches, levels off at the end, and then the last 2 kilometers or so, 2.5, are a ridge line to the finish, flat-ish. So not a pure mountaintop or hilltop finish, which meant that Benji and I thought there'd be a break today, and there was. Combined, the profile not really offering too much for GC contenders in terms of big time gaps, because it's not that long a climb at the end and not a pure mountaintop finish. Combine that with the atrocious weather we had today. And I mean, well, actually wasn't that bad. I mean, La Flamme Rouge, they got Italian people on board there, and they were saying the weather wasn't actually so bad. And it was bad enough, though, for coverage to keep dropping out. So that's my big gripe with today. I think RCS, who own the Giro d'Italia, I don't know if they paid money to have all of the stages broadcast in full or how that economic arrangement is working, but certainly if I'm GCN or Eurosport or SBS or whoever has purchased the Giro d'Italia and the full feed, unless you got the first 2 hours for free and they weren't part of the original deal, I'll be asking to have a bit of a discount on today's stage, because the feed completely cut out, like Yorkshire 2019 World Champs in the men's race. And this always happens in Italy because of the technology that's being used by the host broadcaster Rai. So Rai are the people likely to blame in this scenario for some reason or another. It just keeps happening. And we saw Romney a week ago that terrible weather, you can still have signal, still have live broadcast. And that was in the mountains too. This was in just towns, etc. But you want to hear about that large breakaway. It was the stereotypical one you would expect without any GC threats, and it took a long time to form as well. It had in it Nelson Oliveira on Movistar, De Marchi, the Italian. I think he's won a couple of Grand Tour stages from a break before. Other threats, Valerio Conti, again, similar Italian, UAE Emirates, a threat from the break. Joe Dombrowski, the American, he's won Grand Tour stages. Quinten Hermans and Tarame, Intermarché, Wanty Gobert pairing. Perhaps, when you're hungover, the best thing to do is to get in a break. But they were doing more than just getting in that break. Other threats, Walter, Benji's favourite Hungarian for FDJ. Peter Seri, the only quick-step rider there. And there weren't any real satellite riders apart from, if you want to call Tratnik for Bahrain, but I'm pretty clear he's going for the stage win. And Trek had a few riders, Gabia, Mosca, and Decourt, but no Brambilla or Ciccone. Ciccone too close on GC, as well as Vervaeke and Vendrame and Christopher Juhl Jensen. They were given a huge gap because no one was willing to help Ineos. Ineos were pacing pretty much all day with Filippo Ganna, the poor guy in the Maglia Rosa, so we knew. I mean, I thought, I went in, again, it was a bad question to ask in the pod yesterday, will Ganna lose the Maglia Rosa? When you looked at the final climb in detail, it was clear he probably would, and then when he was pacing for Ineos in these terrible conditions, it was definitely so. Anyway, they got a 6-minute gap, the coverage cut out. I started listening to some Young Lean music with Thai Boy Digital. I think the song was called Diamonds, and then it came back on with about 75, 80 Ks to go. Shortly after, Quinten Hermans and Rein Tarame and Christopher Juhl Jensen attacked out of the breakaway group, having such a large gap on a pretty ambivalent peloton they thought, let's re-attack out of this group. Tarme, obviously, stage hunting specialist. I got a pretty cracked Instagram montage of him when he was at Katusha. He has direct quote said, if anybody going to pay me $100,000, I'm going to keep riding. And I think we all feel that. And he was certainly one of the big threats from that group of three. They eventually got 1 minute and 50 on the group chasing behind, who were mainly headed up by Conti, Dombrowski, Fiorelli for Bardiani, and Demarchi for Israel Startup Nation. They were doing a pretty good job keeping that gap stable. They brought it down on every hill. Eventually, Quinten Hermans got dropped. Meanwhile, the peloton is just, again, letting the gap go out to 8 minutes at this point. 8 minutes to the Tarme trio, with Ganna still pacing all the time. Eventually, Puccio helped him a little bit, but yeah, it was pretty much Bahrain and De Koenig, and who else might be helping them? Middleton weren't really helping. They didn't really have a need to either, but yeah, Ineos left to fend for themselves, which is fine. I guess they have the maglia rosa. Eventually, Quinten Hermans, if I haven't mentioned, he was dropped with 45Ks to go. Tarame went early in a Romandy stage, blew up early the other week. Perhaps the same was, I thought it was a risk the same thing was going to happen today. In the group behind, Demarchi was the favourite in live betting if they were to catch Tarame and Jules Jensen. Bandrame was trying to attack out of Group 2. The cohesion wasn't too good. Eventually, Cavagna took over for De Koenig Quickstep because Ganna was pretty cooked. He was pulling alongside Salvatore Puccio, and the time gap was still at about 8 minutes. Eventually, it only started to come down significantly when Bahrain Victorious got interested. We've just been doing rolling hills all day, but we do have this Colle Passerino coming up. They had done the Monte Melino climb, which in the middle, which when I saw Jules Jensen do it, I was like, oh, damn, that's steep, but nothing really happened out of the GC group, to be frank. And yeah, Bahrain Victorious with a team really eating into that gap. They were pacing on the descent. Morich on the descent was even gapping Cavagna a little bit. And it was Tarame and Jules Jensen making their way to that final climb with about a 1 minute and 15 second gap on a smaller group now of Demarchi, Joe Dombrowski, Fiorelli, Vervaeke, Tratnik, and Nicola Ede. I think Volta might have been close behind as well. Tarme and Jules Jensen pretty much working together. The camera cut away. They were losing seconds so quickly to Demarchi pacing. Dombrowski was riding his own pace on this final Colle Passerino. I'll get to what's happening in the GC group afterwards because, trust me, the way they produced this, I got confused with the way they were cutting between break and GC. I know it's hard, but it was confusing. In the break, Demarchi gaining on Tarame, and eventually with 3Ks left, we saw the gap at about 12 seconds, maybe less. We thought they're not going to make it. Maybe they'd even been caught by that point. And it was Joe Dombrowski. The minute they'd gone past Tarame and Jules Jensen tried to get onto the back of that group, and Dombrowski, I'm not sure if it was an attack, it was more just a race of attrition, went past Demarchi and just held this gap with both of them just riding their own pace, held this gap on Nicole Passerino. And maybe because Demarchi had been working all day, I'm not sure, but Dombrowski was able to maintain that gap to Demarchi and win this stage. I think, let me look up his previous wins. He's won, I thought he'd won a Grand Tour stage. Maybe that was just Demarchi. He's won he won 2 stages of the Tour of Utah. I thought he'd won Grand Tour stages before. He's certainly, I think, gotten close, and he was really talented climber. He's 29 now before, but he won the stage ahead of Demarchi, but it wasn't all lost to Demarchi, who has won 3 stages of the Vuelta, now 2 second places in Giro stages. He goes into the Maglia Rosa, Alessandro Demarchi. Back in the GC group behind, we'll do the full stage results and the GC positions after we've completed that. In the GC group behind, we had Bahrain taking it up with Bilbao, actually. So it seems to me that they're using Bilbao below Caruso in the GC hierarchy, which I don't think is incorrect necessarily. Caruso was fantastic in the Tour last year. They used Bilbao, Mohoric before them. Tratnik was up the road, but they didn't use him as a satellite. He was just going for the stage. They were pacing before that final Colle Passerino at the base. They even split it when they started to hit it hard. De Koenig had been pacing with Knox a bit surgy, the way Knox had been pacing. I saw Honoré shouting at him a bit, actually. And we saw first Vos dropping out of that group. So we knew if he lost 4 seconds, he was out of maglia contention, although the break had taken the maglia. But Vos gone. Almeida started to drop very quickly for De Koenig Quickstep. This was not too long into this climb. And I think this was under the pressure of Bahrain Victorious. And you could see Masnada dropping back for Quickstep, which I'll talk about afterwards, but I don't really agree with that. Dropping that early on that climb, I know it's steep, but it's not so long. They hadn't been doing it so long. Maybe the conditions took their toll on him. Remco Evenepoel wasn't looking too good. He was in the middle of the group, not quite at the front. You can see Carthy moving up in good position. And the question was, is someone going to try and take advantage of Quickstep's misfortune? You even had Seri kind of soft pacing on the front while Almeida was dropping. Bahrain did so, pacing hard for a bit, foot off the gas, then Landa attack. He had to make sense of why his team was pacing all day, and he certainly did. He attacked, I think, might have been after Ciccone. Ciccone did the same thing he did with Galopan on stage 3 yesterday, where it's very frustrating to me what Ciccone is doing, where he said before the Giro he's going for a stage win, not GC. He then hasn't lost time on GC. He's then attacking out of the GC group whilst he hasn't lost time on GC, when if he was in the break today, he wins. And if he hasn't lost time, maybe if he had lost a lot of time before today's stage, even attacking out of the GC group, well, the break had already gone. So what he's doing makes no sense to me. Just fruitless attacks out of the GC group. Landa bridges to him, starts pacing hard. Then I think Vlasov hears on the radio or sees Evenepoel's not up here at the front group. Almeida's dropping. Let's put pressure on him and Bernal. Vlasov attacks and Bernal looks behind and he starts to get in on the action. Bernal bridges to Landa in 5 seconds. They'd had Moscon actually at the front, pacing, trying to keep Ciccone in check. Moscon, I mean, they said yesterday, and Brailsford said Ineos want to ride differently, more exciting, and, they didn't put Moscon and Narvaez in the break today. If Moscon's in the break today, if Ciccone's not there, Moscon wins this stage, pretty clear. But you can't criticise them when you see how important Moscon was on that final climb, keeping things together. So it does make sense if you go for GC to keep him back, but he was very important for Bernal. Bernal bridges to Landa, gets in a group with Carthy, Landa, and Ciccone, as well as Vlasov, looking good, and they start to work together because they've dropped Evenepoel, they've dropped Almeida, and they've dropped Tour of the Alps winner Simon Yates. He was not looking good either in the wet conditions. So super impressive from Bernal. He's certainly on fine form. His Strava data before the Giro said that, and he's showing that today. Evenepoel was pacing the group of Bardet and Yates behind, and that was pretty much that. This is the stage results now with Bernal and his group going ahead, I think about 11 seconds before the Evenepoel group. It'll make sense when I read it all out in full. Dombrowski first, Demarchi second, 13 seconds back. Fiorelli, he came top 10 in the bunch sprint in Navarra. He came third. I'd be looking at that guy. I might sign him as a climby sprinty boy. Vervaeke fourth, Tratnik fifth, Valter sixth, now in the white jersey, I believe. Ede seventh, Oliveira eighth, Tarame ninth, Juliansen and him perhaps going fourth a bit too early. And Juliansen 10th. And now for the GC guys. Bernal 11th on 1:37 with Vlasov Landakasi. 11 seconds at 1:48. Evenepoel Bardet Yates. It's giving same time for Martin Formolo Bettiol Caruso. I guess that's correct. I didn't really see how big that group was, but I guess that's correct. And then behind Evenepoel, 17 seconds back, was Moscon Vendrame. And then these are the GC contenders that really lost quite a bit of time today. Pozzovivo, Buchmann, Nibali, Sivakov, Hindley, Martinez, Soler, Bilbao, Masnada. And then Bennett he lost 90 seconds to Bernal. So that's really bad from Bennett. He's Giro, no chance, it doesn't seem like to me. Almeida, though, 6 minutes back from the stage winner, which means he was 4.5 minutes back on Bernal on this climb that didn't take them that long. It's a 4.3 kilometer climb. The average gradient's under 10%. For a guy, I've been singing his praises as a guy that limits his losses very well. He did not today. He cracked completely, perhaps even under the pace or pressure of his own team pacing, Knox, DeMarchi and co. Not great from Almeida, and his GC ambitions at this Giro d'Italia are over. Evenepoel is the only option for Quick-Step on GC. Otherwise, concerns for Ineos in respect of Sivakov, not looking fantastic either. Buchmann, Pozzovivo, I mean, I didn't expect too much better. They didn't lose too much, but you would have liked to see them in the Evenepoel group. Simon Yates is a little bit more concerning to me than Evenepoel. Evenepoel, I guess, he's got the last TT, but I don't think there's a lot more climb before that last TT. But B, wet stage, it's his first week back racing. He's come back from that injury. His first major climb back from that injury in racing, and it's just a really horrible day. Simon Yates, though, is coming in with super hot form from the Tour of the Alps, winning that, and he was the favourite for this year's Giro, and it was Evenepoel pulling on the front of that group. Yates was just clinging on. So if I'm Bike Exchange, I'd be a little bit concerned. Are we getting, I said in the preview, or maybe my GC preview on my main channel, which Yates are you going to get? And are we getting the Yates that is just sort of clinging on? But the big winner is Bernal. Yes, we knew he can do these watts anyway. We knew he can perform like this anyway. And this doesn't mean that his back is going to be fine in the third week. But there certainly is confirmation that he looks to be the strongest of the GC men right now. The way he bridged across to Landa, I'm sure on a longer climb, I have no doubt he could have dropped them. Carthy looked excellent. Again, on steep climb, bad conditions. Conditions look very good. And you'd have to say Landa and Vlasov, they'll just be very consistent, not only for challenging for maybe the top step, if there's a big problem with Bernal, Yates, or Evenepoel, or Bernal in particular, but yeah, podium for those 3 or 2 looks pretty likely for at least one of them. I think there will be a big cracking in either Yates or Evenepoel, don't know which. But yeah, pretty interesting stage. I'm not sure we got the medium mountain chaos they were hoping for. It was pretty much just a punch on the final climb. At the end of the day, it was only an 11-second GC gap. But DeMarchi goes into the Maglia Rosa, 22 seconds ahead of Dombrowski. In terms of the GC men, you've got Vlasov 4 seconds ahead of Evenepoel, and Carthy is about 14 seconds behind Vlasov, same as Egan Bernal. Simon Yates a little bit further back at sort of 25, 35 seconds because of those TT losses. But before we get into the preview of tomorrow's stage, I want to mention our show partner, Le Col. They've got a Giro code special for you, LRCP20, all caps. The 20 is in numbers, not letters, until the end of the Giro d'Italia to get 20% off any of their products. They brought out their new collaboration with McLaren, Project Aero. You can go and check that out through the link down below, and they are making this podcast possible. And certainly when Benji and I do the Tour de France podcast, hopefully in person, because I fly out to Europe on the first rest day of this Giro on Tuesday, that's through Le Col's support. But yeah, pretty interesting stage. If you're watching on YouTube or podcast players, let us know on Twitter or in the comments down below. Time to preview tomorrow's stage, which will not be as interesting. Modena to Cattolica, 177 Ks long. We've got the Ciclamino sprint, 70 Ks in, then the bonus second sprint, 136 Ks in, and then a pretty flat finish in Cattolica. It looks like a UAE or Tour of Turkey stage. It's a straight line pretty much until 130 Ks are done. So maybe if you want to, go and ride your bike or do something else, famous last words, then maybe just tune into the last 3 Ks or 5 Ks of this one. Favourites for the stage, Merlier, Ewan, all the sprinters, Viviani, Nizzolo, Sagan, you'd be expecting to be up there. Honestly, Merlier looks really, really good. And I'd have to look at the odds for tomorrow to really express a view on who's value, but I'm not sure I see Ewan might be better in a vacuum side by side, but Merlier seems to be in fantastic form, and I just don't trust the Ewan lead out. So I don't really have a strong view on tomorrow at all. But otherwise, I just think one thing that I wanted to come back to was the Masnada dropping back for Almeida for Quick-Step. I think we sometimes underestimate when these these young talents have come through: Evenepoel, Bernal, Pogacar, and we think, okay, two of them have already won the Tour de France, and they're already GC born winners. But we've seen this year already their teams as a whole are not, and the riders on those teams are not used to protecting the jersey day in, day out in a stage race. UAE and Basque Country, sort of very bad mistake and an obvious error that you wouldn't have seen Ineos make, where they took the foot off the gas and didn't go on a tricky descent in the front. You'll always see Ineos do that when they're protecting a jersey, particularly in a stage they're trying to control. And then today, seeing Masnada drop back with Almeida cracking so early, I don't know, maybe Masnada was dropping himself, but to me, I thought De Koning would have approached this stage by trying to get Masnada in the breakaway to put pressure on the other teams, because there were no GC threats, no satellite riders in that break. And I really thought Masnada getting up there, he's not going to gain times in the TTs. He will lose time in the climbs, the big ones, one would think, if Bernal is firing. Getting him up there is a big way to put pressure on Ineos. But Ineos are being lent on a lot as well by the other teams. Bahrain let them do a lot of the work and then came through late. So Bahrain are looking good. Quick Step definitely will be licking their wounds and thinking about how they're going to approach tomorrow or the next stages. I mean, in terms of difficult stages to come, the stage 6 after the sprint stage tomorrow is a long climb to Ascoli Piceno. I think you'll see Almeida working as a domestique for Evenepoel there. That climb suits Almeida a lot more. It's steady gradient. It's under 8%. It's not even the final ramp. The average is 6%. So I think we'll be seeing Almeida working as a domestique for the rest of this race. Otherwise, I'd like to see Ciccone losing time on GC so we can get in the break, but you can't get... you can't have your hopes every time. I was a little bit disappointed Tarame didn't win. I've obviously was hoping to put another Tommy Cash montage together, but you can't get what you want every stage. Ultimately, a pretty good stage. In terms of stage design, if they changed the finish and had it as a mountaintop, would that have changed anything? I don't really think so. I think the way Ineos were approaching it was see who was weak or cracking, play defensively and conservatively, and then attack with Bernal if you do see an opportunity arise and try and be opportunistic in that sense. Has it affected the GC sort of betting market? Yes. Vlasov is now 8-1 to win the Giro. Bernal's heavy favourite, 2-1. Yates is drifted a lot. Evenepoel's drifted a fair bit, and Landa and Carthy have come right in. Is that an overreaction? I think so. When you look even in the Vuelta last year, people strong on the climbs changes every day. But that was just me doing the Giro d'Italia Stage 4 recap today. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you watched the stage itself, or maybe you turned it on, you couldn't watch it. And we'll be back, and I'll be back with Benji tomorrow, because doing these solo monologues are very difficult to collect your thoughts. Until then, ciao.